28 years ago, my dad told me this place builds men, not just steel. Standing in the orange glow of furnace number 3 at 6 a.m., watching sparks cascade like industrial fireworks, I still believe that's true. The black and white photo on my desk shows the 1965 crew, including Dad in his hard hat with that crooked grin. He worked these same floors for 35 years before his heart gave out at 58. I keep his old hard hat in my locker, dented and scarred from decades of honest work. My name's Wesley, and I've been operations floor supervisor at Bridgeton Steelworks since I was 19. Started the day after high school graduation with a wrench and a willingness to learn. Now at 47, I can diagnose equipment problems by sound alone. That bearing in the rolling mill has been singing flat for 3 days. She'll seize up by Thursday if we don't address it. The constant hum of blast furnaces, the rhythmic clang of drop hammers every 30 seconds, the hiss and pop of steam vents, these sounds are my heartbeat. This mill has survived 3 recessions and foreign competition. We make railroad components, structural steel, defense contracts. Real steel for real purposes. But 18 months ago, everything changed when the Bridgeton family sold to Meridian Capital, a private equity firm with big plans for modernization. That's when they brought in Brandon Kelly, 32 years old with an MBA from Northwestern and 8 years at McKinsey Consulting. That's when my problem started. Brandon Kelly's title is Director of Digital Operations Transformation. His first day, he walked the floor in a pressed shirt and Italian leather shoes, taking notes on an iPad while I explained our processes. When I showed him the furnace startup sequence, preheat, purge, ignition, same since 1962, he nodded like he understood. He didn't. "Wesley," he said, using corporate speak I'd grown to hate, "we need to leverage synergistic opportunities in operational transformation. This legacy thinking is inhibiting our disruptive innovation potential." I translated that in my head. He wanted to fix things that weren't broken with fancy words. The changes started small. Digital dashboards replaced our paper logs I'd kept meticulously for 28 years in worn leather notebooks. Every shift, every temperature reading, every maintenance note. The new system crashed twice a week, usually during shift changes when we needed the data most. Then came the optimization. Brandon eliminated what he called redundant safety protocols, the extra checks that had given us a 3-year, 847-day streak without a lost time accident. When I objected, he smiled that condescending smile. "Data shows these protocols create unnecessary friction in workflow efficiency," he said. "Data doesn't show the near miss we had in 09 when Jimmy almost lost his hand because someone skipped a lockout step," I replied. "These protocols exist because of blood and experience." He made a note on his iPad, probably marking me as resistant to change. The worst part? He was taking credit for everything we'd built. My zero-incident initiative had kept us accident-free for 3 years. The vendor renegotiation program I'd built over 15 years saved the company $2, $3 million annually. Modified furnace protocols I'd developed increased efficiency 23% while reducing energy costs. Brandon presented all of this to the board as inherited baseline optimization opportunities. He removed my name from every document, called it Legacy Process Modernization. During the quarterly presentation to Meridian Capital, he stood at that polished conference table and claimed credit for 28 years of my work. "We've elevated these informal practices into systematic excellence," he told the suits. Informal practices. 28 years of documented improvements, training programs, and safety innovations reduced to informal practices. The breaking point came after I returned from a 4-day OSHA safety conference, which I'd paid for myself. Walking onto the operations floor that Tuesday morning, something felt wrong. The usual buzz of machinery was there, but the rhythm was off. My team's workstation, 7 spots I'd fought management to properly equip, was empty. Not just empty. Stripped. No gear, no chairs, not even the laminated safety sheets I'd posted myself. I found Jimmy Kowalski from payroll walking by with his coffee. "Where's my team?" He looked down like I'd caught him stealing. "Check the basement," he mumbled. "They moved your guys yesterday." I didn't ask who they was. I already knew. Taking the stairs 2 at a time, I descended into what used to be the old break room near janitorial. And there they were. 7 grown men crammed into a space that looked like a crime scene from the 90s. Folding tables instead of proper workstations. Mismatched chairs. Cables duct taped to cracked walls. A mop bucket in the corner collecting water from a ceiling leak. Flickering fluorescent lights that hummed with the wrong frequency. Jimmy Kowalski, 58 years old and senior furnace operator, looked up from his tablet. He'd worked alongside my father, started here the same year I was born. While you were at that conference, he said, voice flat, Brandon showed up with a moving crew. Gave us 30 minutes to clear out. Said it was to make space for incoming automated systems. Tony Benedetti, our quality control chief, didn't look up from his paperwork. He called it optimizing floor space utilization, Tony said, doing a mocking impression of Brandon's corporate speak. Terry O'Brien, maintenance chief, and the guy I'd trained from apprentice to expert, just shook his head. 25 years in this building. Never been treated like spare parts until now. The basement wasn't just a demotion. It was a message. You're forgotten. You're obsolete. You don't matter, but these men did matter. Jimmy could run those furnaces with his eyes closed, knew every sound, every vibration that meant trouble. Tony had saved us from costly recalls with his attention to detail. Terry could fix anything with scrap metal and determination. I'd handpicked every one of them over the years. Pack everything, I told them quietly. Tools, files, notes. Everything you'd take with you someday. Keep it quiet, between us. They didn't ask questions. They just nodded and got to work. 3 weeks later, the first major equipment failure hit. I was on vacation, my first in 3 years, fishing up at Lake Superior when Tony called. Wesley, you need to get back here. Number 2, furnace seized up. Main bearing's gone. That bearing. The one that had been singing flat. The one I'd warned them about. The one Brandon's new digital system said was operating within acceptable parameters. I drove 8 hours straight back to Bridgeton. The mill floor was chaos. Production stopped. Steam everywhere. The acrid smell of overheated metal and burning oil. Brandon stood in the middle of it all, shouting instructions that made no sense to anyone who actually understood the equipment. We need to implement emergency protocols and optimize recovery procedures, he was telling Terry, who just stared at him like he was speaking alien. The damage was severe. 6 days of downtime. A lost defense contract with Northrop Grumman, worth $8 million. When the client called asking for me specifically to consult on the restart, Brandon intercepted the call. Wesley's resistance to modernization contributed to inadequate training documentation, he told them. Inadequate training documentation. I had 28 years of detailed maintenance logs showing exactly when that bearing needed replacement. Brandon's system had overridden my recommendations 3 times. But the real betrayal came the following Monday. Walking past the executive conference room, I heard voices. The door was cracked open, and I recognized Brandon's voice immediately. We're systematically eliminating outdated thinking and legacy resistance, he was saying to the board. Some people can't adapt to modern operational excellence. Legacy resistance. That's what 28 years of expertise had become. That afternoon, I made some calls. Started with Patricia Vance, director at Sheffield Steel. We'd worked together 15 years ago before she moved up in the world. Wesley, she said, surprise in her voice. Haven't heard from you in months. How's Bridgeton treating you? That's actually why I'm calling. Hypothetically, if I had a team of experienced operators looking for new opportunities, would Sheffield be interested? Long pause. Hypothetically, I'd be very interested. Your reputation in this industry carries weight, Wesley. What's going on over there? I told her about Brandon, about the basement, about the credit theft. She listened without interrupting. I can offer your entire team positions at 20% above current salary, she said. But Wesley, are you sure? You've been there your whole career. I'm sure about protecting my people. Let me work on something first. Next call was to Tommy Walsh, our union steward. Tommy had been my first trainee 15 years ago, fresh out of high school and eager to learn. Now he represented 800 workers across 3 shifts. Tommy, I need to ask you something in confidence. If I filed a formal grievance about safety violations, would the union back me? Wesley, you trained half the guys on this floor. If you say there are safety problems, we listen. What do you need? Documentation, photographs, and maybe a petition. How many signatures you thinking? All of them, Tommy. Every single one. The third call was the most important. Thomas Bridgeton Sr., son of the company founder, still held 30% ownership and a board seat. His father had mentored me personally in my early years. Mr. Bridgeton, it's Wesley. I know you're busy, but I need 5 minutes of your time. Something's happening at the mill that you should know about. Thomas Sr. had always told us to call him Tom, but some habits die hard. His voice was gravelly from years of cigars and tough decisions. Wesley, son, you never call unless it's important. What's going on? I told him everything. The basement, the safety violations, Brandon's track record that nobody had bothered to check, the equipment failure that cost us the Northrop contract. Son of a bitch, he muttered. I wasn't in favor of hiring that boy, but Dale pushed for him. Said we needed young blood. What do you need from me? An emergency board meeting. And 5 minutes to present facts. You got it. This Friday, 9 a.m. sharp. That week, I became a detective. Called my contacts at the American Steel Institute. Reached out to former colleagues at other mills. Everyone had a story about Brandon Kelly or someone just like him. The McKinsey connection was interesting. Turned out Brandon had left under a performance improvement plan, corporate speak for being fired. 3 companies he'd optimized in the past 5 years. 2 went bankrupt, 1 laid off 60% of its workforce. His Northwestern MBA thesis was on disruptive service industries, not manufacturing, not steel, not anything related to what we actually did. Meanwhile, Tommy worked magic with the union. By Thursday afternoon, he had signatures from 180 workers supporting my formal grievance. Not just names, detailed statements about safety violations, equipment problems, and workflow disruptions since Brandon's arrival. The pieces were falling into place. Friday morning couldn't come soon enough. Friday morning, I showed up at headquarters wearing my cleanest work clothes and carrying Dad's old hard hat. The boardroom smelled like fresh coffee and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the mill, where steam rose from the cooling bays like industrial fog. Around the polished mahogany table sat the faces that controlled Bridgeton Steel. Thomas Bridgeton Sr. at the head, his weathered hands folded over a stack of papers. 3 Meridian Capital representatives in identical Navy suits. Dale Murphy, our plant manager, looking uncomfortable. And Brandon, confident as ever in his $2,000 suit. "Gentlemen," Thomas Sr. said, "Wesley has some concerns to bring to our attention." "Wesley, the floor is yours." I placed Dad's hard hat on the table and opened my folder. 28 years of documentation, performance records, safety logs, client testimonials, financial data showing real costs versus Brandon's fictional projections. "This bearing," I said, pulling out a worn steel component, "is 30 years old. It outlasted 3 of Brandon's innovative replacements and never failed. The bearing that seized last month? Brandon's system recommended replacement every 6 months instead of the annual replacement I'd documented for 28 years. One of the Meridian suits leaned forward. "What's your point?" "My point is that experience matters. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. This is institutional knowledge built on decades of real-world problem solving." I laid out the evidence methodically. The equipment failures, the lost contracts, the safety violations, Brandon's track record at previous companies, the union petition signed by 180 workers. "Brandon told this board I represent legacy resistance," I said. "Let me show you what legacy really looks like." I flipped to page 4 of my report. These numbers show that my team, working in a basement with leaking ceilings and inadequate equipment, still handled 80% of high-priority maintenance last quarter. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. His usual confident smirk was fading. Page 7 compares Brandon's efficiency projections to actual outputs. He promised 20% improvement. We've seen 12% decline since his optimization began. Thomas Sr. was taking notes now, his expression growing darker. And page 10, I continued, lists every system Brandon promised to streamline. Not one has delivered on its projected benefits. Meanwhile, our safety record, 3 years without incident, ended the day his protocols took effect. "Wesley," Brandon interrupted, his voice strained, "you're being resistant to necessary modernization. These growing pains are expected when—" "Growing pains?" I cut him off. "Jimmy Kowalski has 35 years of experience. Tony Benedetti prevented 6 potential recalls last year alone. Terry O'Brien rebuilt our pressure system with scrap metal when your fancy replacement parts were back-ordered for 3 months. You call that legacy resistance?" I reached into my folder and pulled out the final documents. Here's Brandon's employment history. Public record, 3 companies in 5 years. All restructured within 18 months of his departure. 2 filed bankruptcy. 1 massive layoff. The room went dead silent. Brandon's face had gone pale. "I also spoke to former colleagues at McKinsey," I continued. "Brandon left under a performance improvement plan. That's corporate speak for being fired." Thomas Sr. leaned back in his chair. "Dale, did you verify any of this before hiring him?" Dale Murphy looked like he wanted to disappear. We focused on his MBA credentials and modernization experience. Experience destroying companies, apparently. "There's one more thing," I said, standing up. "Brandon, you've been telling people you understand our systems. Let me test that understanding." I gestured toward the window overlooking the mill floor. "From here, you can see furnace number 3. Walk me through the startup sequence." Brandon's confident facade cracked completely. That's not really relevant to strategic oversight. Preheat, purge, ignition," I said simply. Same sequence since 1962. Every operator on that floor knows it by heart. You claim to be optimizing our processes, but you don't know the most basic procedure we perform. Thomas Sr. stood up slowly. Brandon, I think we've heard enough. Dale, I want to see you in my office after this meeting. One of the Meridian reps cleared his throat. What exactly are you proposing, Wesley? I'd been waiting for this question. Two options. Option one, my team accepts positions at Sheffield Steel starting Monday. We walk away, you deal with the consequences. Option two, you create a traditional operations division. My team reports directly to the board, not through Brandon's chain of command. We maintain the systems that actually work while you figure out what modernization really means. And Brandon? Thomas Sr. asked. That's above my pay grade, sir. But I'd suggest you look at those company outcomes again before making any decisions. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to review the situation. By Monday morning, Brandon's office was cleaned out. Amanda Cross, the HR partner who'd helped orchestrate the basement move, got promoted to corporate headquarters, which meant she was out of our mill. Dale Murphy kept his job, but with reduced authority. The new organizational chart showed my traditional operations division reporting directly to Thomas Sr. The next few weeks were like watching a house of cards collapse. Brandon's digital transformation systems, already unstable, began failing spectacularly without his team to maintain them. The dashboard that was supposed to revolutionize our operations crashed for 6 hours during a critical defense contract delivery. Terry O'Brien looked at the blank screen and shrugged. Good thing we never threw away those paper logs. My team moved back to the main floor. Not just back, upgraded. New workstations, proper lighting, climate control. Thomas Sr. made sure we had everything we needed. The basement got converted into additional storage space, which it should have been all along. The real satisfaction came from the industry response. Word travels fast in steel manufacturing, and Brandon's spectacular failure became a cautionary tale. Trade publications picked up the story. Traditional expertise proves irreplaceable in digital age. I was quoted as saying, technology should enhance experience, not replace it. Patricia Vance called to congratulate me. You know, Sheffield's offer still stands if you ever want a change of scenery. Thanks, Patricia, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be. 3 months later, I was promoted to plant operations manager. My first decision was establishing a mentorship program pairing experienced workers with newer employees. We called it the Legacy Knowledge Initiative. Jimmy Kowalski, who'd worked alongside my father for 15 years, became our senior training coordinator. Your dad would be proud, he told me one morning as we watched a new apprentice learn proper furnace startup procedures. This place really does build men, not just steel. The photo on my desk now has a companion, a new picture of my entire team, posed in front of the same furnace where Dad's generation had worked. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at the American Steel Institute's annual conference. The topic, balancing innovation with institutional knowledge. Standing at that podium, looking out at 500 industry professionals, I thought about Dad's worn hard hat sitting in my office. Ladies and gentlemen, I've worked in steel for 28 years. I've seen countless consultants come through our doors promising revolutionary changes. Some brought valuable improvements, others brought expensive disasters. The difference was simple: the good ones listened to the people who actually did the work. The applause was immediate and sustained. In the front row, Patricia Vance gave me a thumbs up. 3 competitors approached me afterward with job offers, but the real victory was smaller and more personal. That afternoon, walking through the mill, I stopped at furnace number 3, where a young apprentice named Marcus was learning startup procedures from Jimmy Kowalski. Remember, Jimmy was saying, the sequence never changes. Preheat, purge, ignition. Your eyes and ears tell you more than any computer screen. Marcus nodded, scribbling notes in a small notebook, just like I had 28 years ago. Mr. Wesley, he called out when he saw me. Mr. Jimmy was telling me about your dad. He said this place builds men, not just steel. I smiled, watching the orange glow from the furnace reflect off their safety glasses. That's right, Marcus. And every man who works here leaves his mark on the steel we make. Remember that. As I walked away, I could hear the familiar sounds of home, the hum of blast furnaces, the rhythmic clang of drop hammers, the hiss of steam. But now there was something new mixed in, the sound of knowledge being passed down, of traditions being preserved, of experience being valued. The best revenge, I learned, isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just proving that what you built was worth building in the first place. A year after Brandon's departure, Bridgeton Steel posted its most profitable quarter in 5 years. Our zero-accident streak resumed and continued. The defense contracts that had been in jeopardy were renewed, with clients specifically requesting our team's continued involvement. Brandon's story had a different ending. I heard through industry contacts that he'd started a YouTube channel selling leadership courses for $499 a seat. The videos I saw featured him in an expensive suit talking about optimizing human capital allocation. I watched 5 minutes of one episode before I had to turn it off. Dale Murphy, our plant manager who'd championed Brandon, quietly announced early retirement. His replacement was someone I'd recommended, Maria Santos, a 20-year veteran from our sister plant in Ohio who understood both traditional operations and genuine innovation. Wesley, she said during our first meeting, I've heard about what happened here. I want you to know that experience and innovation aren't enemies. They're partners. I respected that. Real change comes from understanding what works before you try to improve it. The basement space that had once housed my humiliated team became our new employee training center. We installed proper lighting, climate control, and state-of-the-art equipment. The plaque outside the door reads, Legacy Knowledge Training Center, where experience meets innovation. Jimmy Kowalski suggested we hang a photo of my dad's 1965 crew in the main hallway. Let the new kids see what built this place, he said. Every morning, walking past that photo, I remember what Dad told me. This place builds men, not just steel. 2 years later, I received a letter that would have made Dad laugh. The American Society of Manufacturing Engineers wanted to award me their Industrial Innovation Excellence Medal for developing what they called integrative knowledge preservation methodologies. In plain English, I'd figured out how to help experienced workers train new people without losing institutional knowledge. Revolutionary stuff, apparently. The ceremony was in Chicago, black tie affair in a hotel ballroom filled with executives and academics. Standing at the podium accepting the award, I looked down at my prepared remarks and decided to go off script. This award has my name on it, but it belongs to every worker who ever took time to show a newcomer the right way to do something. It belongs to my father, who worked 35 years in steel and taught me that knowledge without wisdom is just information. And it belongs to my team at Bridgeton Steel, who proved that experience and innovation make better partners than enemies. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. More importantly, the approach we'd developed was being implemented at steel mills across the Midwest. Companies were hiring back veteran workers as mentors instead of pushing them toward early retirement. Thomas Bridgeton Sr. called me that night. Wesley, your dad would have been proud. Hell, I'm proud. You saved this company from making a costly mistake. We all did, Mr. Bridgeton. That's how it works when people actually listen to each other. 6 months later, Meridian Capital sold their stake back to the Bridgeton family. Private equity had learned that some things shouldn't be optimized, just preserved and respected. The mill floor at 6 a.m. still sounds the same as it did 28 years ago. The constant hum of blast furnaces, the rhythmic clang of drop hammers, the hiss and pop of steam vents. But now when I walk through, I see something Dad would have loved. Young workers asking questions, veteran operators sharing knowledge, and everyone understanding that we're not just making steel, we're building the next generation of craftsmen. Marcus, the apprentice who'd reminded me of myself, graduated to full operator last month. At his ceremony, he gave a speech about learning from the old guys who built this place. He's 22 years old and already talks like he understands what it means to be part of something bigger than himself. That same week, I got an email from an unexpected source. Brandon Kelly's LinkedIn message was brief. Wesley, I wanted to reach out and acknowledge that I made mistakes at Bridgeton. I've learned a lot since then and have great respect for what you built there. Would be open to a conversation if you're ever interested. I thought about it for a week before responding. Brandon, I appreciate the message. The best apology is changed behavior. Good luck with whatever you're building next. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. Some lessons are best learned from distance, but I respected that he'd reached out. Takes character to admit when you're wrong, especially publicly. Maybe he'd learned something after all. The real satisfaction wasn't in his apology, though. It was in walking through our mill every morning and seeing what we'd preserved. Not just equipment and processes, but an entire culture of craftsmanship that almost got thrown away for the sake of buzzwords and quarterly reports. Today marks 30 years since I first walked through these doors. The anniversary dinner is next week. The whole family will be there, including my son Jake, who just finished his engineering degree. He's been asking about working at Bridgeton, wants to learn the business from the ground up. Dad, he said last month, I've heard stories about what happened with that consultant. about how you fought for your team. I want to be part of something like that. I told him the same thing my father told me. This place builds men, not just steel. But character isn't inherited. It's earned through choices you make when nobody's watching. The industry has changed since Brandon's departure. Companies are hiring back experienced workers, creating mentor programs, understanding that institutional knowledge has real value. The pendulum swung too far toward disruption and is slowly swinging back toward balance. Last week, Thomas Bridgeton Sr. announced his retirement and my promotion to Vice President of Operations. In my acceptance speech to the board, I kept it simple. 30 years ago, I started here with a wrench and willingness to learn. Today we have young operators carrying on traditions while embracing genuine innovation. We've proven that respecting experience doesn't mean fearing change. It means understanding what's worth preserving before you decide what needs fixing. The applause was warm, but the real satisfaction came later, walking through the mill at shift change. Jimmy Kowalski, now our senior training director, was showing a group of new apprentices the startup sequence for furnace number 3. Remember, he was telling them, the fundamentals never change. Preheat, purge, ignition. But your eyes and ears will teach you things no manual can. Standing in my new office, the same one where Thomas Sr. made the decision to give me 5 minutes with the board, I keep Dad's hard hat on the bookshelf next to my engineering manuals and industry awards. The black and white photo of his 1965 crew hangs prominently on the wall, joined now by dozens of photos documenting our journey from that dark basement to this moment. The irony isn't lost on me. Brandon came in talking about digital transformation and ended up teaching us the most analog lesson of all. People matter more than processes. Relationships matter more than reorganizations. And wisdom isn't something you download. It's something you earn. Yesterday, Tony Benedetti brought me a newspaper clipping. The business section featured an article about manufacturing renaissance in the Rust Belt, and Bridgeton Steel was mentioned as a case study in successful integration of traditional expertise with modern efficiency. Look at that, Tony said, grinning. We're famous for doing our jobs right. Terry O'Brien stopped by this morning to report on our latest safety milestone, 18 months without incident and counting. The new digital monitoring system is actually pretty good, he admitted. But we kept your paper backup logs just in case. Smart man. Technology should serve the work, not the other way around. Next month, I'm speaking at a manufacturing conference in Detroit about knowledge preservation in industrial settings. The abstract mentions developing sustainable mentorship programs, but what I really want to talk about is simpler. How listening to people who've done the work can prevent expensive mistakes. The conference in Detroit was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 200 people in a hotel ballroom, mostly plant managers and operations directors dealing with similar challenges. My talk was scheduled right after lunch, the dreaded graveyard slot when half the audience fights off food comas. But something interesting happened when I started speaking. Instead of the polite, scattered attention I'd expected, the room went quiet, really quiet. When I described finding my team in that basement, when I talked about Brandon's digital dashboard crashing during critical operations, when I explained how we documented 28 years of institutional knowledge, people leaned forward. The Q&A session ran 30 minutes over. A plant manager from Pennsylvania asked, "How do you convince corporate that experience has measurable value?" A quality director from Michigan wanted to know about our mentorship program structure. Someone from Ohio asked if we'd consider consulting for other mills. After the session, a line of people waited to exchange cards and stories. Every single one had a Brandon story, maybe not the same details, but the same pattern. Young executives with impressive credentials and no practical knowledge, making expensive changes to systems they didn't understand. The worst part, said a supervisor from a plant in Indiana, is that they make us feel like dinosaurs for knowing our jobs. I understood that feeling completely. For a while, I'd started to doubt whether my approach was outdated, whether my resistance to change was the problem. Brandon had been very good at making experienced workers feel obsolete, but experience isn't obsolete. It's irreplaceable. The trick is distinguishing between experience and stubbornness, between wisdom and habit. Flying back from Detroit, I thought about a conversation I'd had with my son Jake the week before. He'd been working part-time at the mill during his summer break, learning the basics before his official start date after graduation. "Dad, some of the other engineering students think I'm crazy for wanting to work in manufacturing," he'd said. "They're all heading to tech companies or consulting firms. They say steel is a dying industry." I'd laughed. Son, people have been predicting the death of steel since I started working. Every skyscraper, every bridge, every car still needs steel. The difference is that now we make it better, safer, and more efficiently than ever before. But his question had stuck with me. How do you convince the next generation that there's value in building things, in understanding how materials and machines and processes actually work? The answer came to me during the flight. You don't convince them with arguments, you show them. You let them feel the satisfaction of solving real problems, of creating something tangible, of being part of a tradition that stretches back generations while still moving forward. When I got back to Bridgeton, I found Jake in the training center, working alongside Marcus to troubleshoot a minor issue with one of the cooling systems. They had the manual open, but they were also listening to the equipment, using their senses to understand what the problem might be. Any luck? I asked. Jake looked up, oil smudge on his cheek and enthusiasm in his eyes. I think we found it. There's a bearing that sounds off. Same kind of issue you dealt with a few years ago. 3 generations of knowledge, right there in one room. This morning, 31 years after I first walked through these doors, I stood in the same spot where I used to look at Dad's photo every morning. The picture is still there, but now it's surrounded by dozens of others. Apprentices who became operators, operators who became supervisors, young engineers who learned to respect both innovation and tradition. Jake starts full-time next month. Yesterday, he asked if he could have Grandpa's hard hat for his first official day. It's yours, I told him. But remember what it represents. Not just safety on the job, but respect for the people who built this place and responsibility for the people who will come after you. The mill sounds the same as it did 3 decades ago. The hum of blast furnaces, the clang of drop hammers, the hiss of steam. But the conversations are different now. I hear young voices asking questions, experienced voices sharing knowledge, and everyone understanding that we're not just making steel. We're building something that lasts. Last week, Marcus was promoted to shift supervisor. At 24, he's one of the youngest in company history. During his acceptance speech, he said something that would have made Dad proud. I learned from people who knew that experience isn't about being stuck in the past. It's about understanding what works so you can build something better. Brandon taught us something valuable after all, though not what he intended. He showed us that some things can't be disrupted, optimized, or transformed away. Some things, like knowledge passed from one generation to the next, like respect earned through competence, like the satisfaction of building something that lasts, those things are irreplaceable. In the end, this place really does build men, not just steel.
I'm freezing. I'm bleeding. Slowly fading away. But don't worry. I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry. I'll pretend till my last breath, even while my soul is fading. I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry. I'll pretend till my last breath, even while my soul is fading. I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smile, No, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.
Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to.
There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you.